I'd like to begin by revisiting a crucial document in American history, the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration asserts, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
Drafted in 1776, nearly a century before the dawn of the Civil War, the Declaration of Independence embodied freedom, liberty, democracy, and equality, the ideals of the new nation.
Yet these ideals did not apply to all people. Specifically, they did not apply to slaves. Many white Americans viewed black slaves as their inferiors and their property, and firmly believed that they should not be entitled to the same rights as whites.
Gradually, freedom and liberty came to be associated with white-skinned men, and generally did not extend to black people.
Not all Americans viewed slavery from this angle. Prior to the Civil War, various people voiced their disapproval of slavery, including a group of German Quakers in 1688, Benjamin Rush in 1773, and John Adams in the early 1800s.
Beginning in the 1800s, the market revolution swept across America and transformed the North and the West into more industrialized economies, bustling with opportunity.
Meanwhile, the economy of the South flourished as a result of plantation slave labor used to harvest cotton and other staple crops. Unlike the North, slavery was an essential component to the culture of the South.
Southerners defended slavery through racism, references to biblical passages, and the claim that slavery guaranteed equality and independence for whites.
As slavery penetrated into American political, social, and economic spheres, it caused major sectional tensions amongst the northern free states and the southern slave states.
Northerners challenged the Southern pro-slavery argument and spread their message across the North.
Simultaneously, the South worked to defend slavery at all costs and adhered to the notion that freedom was not possible without slavery, as said by the Richmond Enquirer in the 1830s.
Slaves, too, began to resist by breaking tools, fleeing to the North, and organizing rebellions against whites in the South.
They demanded the rights for liberty and freedom and longed to escape the prevalent injustice and inequality in the South.
In 1852, Frederick Douglass pointed out the severe hypocrisy of America, which claimed to be the land of liberty, yet allowed the wicked institution of slavery to exist.
He concluded that when America abolished slavery and refused to let race stand in the way of the great doctrines of the Declaration of Independence, it would finally live up to the free and equal standards it originally promised.
Territorial expansion westwards deepened the sectional split between the North and the South. With all the new territory, the inevitable controversy arose. Would slavery be instituted in these lands or not?
Conflict ensued, and political party lines crumbled regionally. Northerners opposed the expansion of slavery, while Southerners supported it.
Beyond opposition to the institution of slavery, Northerners wanted to prevent Southern domination of the federal government and felt the establishment of plantations would impede migration westward.
Southerners believed that the failure of slavery to expand would violate their rights as members of the Union and threaten their lifestyles dependent on slavery. Furthermore, they feared that the South would be underrepresented while the non-slaveholding would dominate federal power.
The tension between the North and South neared its breaking point, following the Compromise of 1850.
Henry Clay attempted to settle the disputes of slavery, but the Fugitive Slave Act in the Compromise, which granted Southerners the right to reclaim runaways, alarmed Northerners. They resisted the Fugitive Slave Act and viewed the requirement to return runaways as a violation of their rights.
The South no longer found consolation in the Constitution or in the Union.
The Constitution ambiguously addressed state and federal authority. It did not explicitly convey which authority had the power to determine the fate of slavery.
The South also saw no reason to continue remaining in a union that failed to represent or protect them. The election of 1860 held no promise for the South.
Abraham Lincoln, the new President of the United States, was a Republican from Illinois, a supporter of abolition, and a vehement believer in blacks' entitlement to the inalienable rights outlined by the Declaration of Independence.
Without further ado, the South finally decided to secede from the Union in 1860 and formed a Confederacy, electing Jefferson Davis as their president.
Lincoln stressed that the Union would not make war, which they did not.
On April 12, 1861, the Confederacy fired the first shot at Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina, and thus began the Civil War.
In 1863, midway through the war, Abraham Lincoln delivered one of his most famous speeches at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
He ended his Gettysburg address with these historic final words: "This nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth."
The new birth of freedom Lincoln envisioned gave people of any color, black or white, the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and finally transpired 5 years after the end of the Civil War. Though Americans had declared independence nearly a century ago, the year of 1870 marked the beginning of a new era in which truer meanings of freedom, liberty, democracy, and equality would take hold in the nation.